remember who you really are. You are a piece of Hashem, and He wants you to talk to her. Oh Hashem, I just want to talk to you. I want to get close to you. Oh Hashem, I want to talk to you. I want to get close to you. Every now and then speak to Him in your own words. Learn this from the beautiful birds. Watch them tweet, get out of your seat, and go to the woods and talk to the Lord. Every now and then speak to Him in your own words. Learn this from the beautiful birds. Watch them tweet, get out of your seat, and go to the woods and talk to the Lord. Oh Hashem,
I want to talk to you.
I want to get
Close to you. Oh Hashem, I want to talk to you. I want to get close to you. Good afternoon, my holy brothers and sisters. This is AT Daily at a special time, 2 hours earlier than our normal time. Sorry I didn't give you notice yesterday. I posted it on the page a little while ago when I found out we were going to need to go early today. As always, the show remains available every day. Every show is on our Facebook page and on our YouTube page, Accidental Talmudist, on both Facebook and YouTube. Also, you can always go to accidentaltalmudist.org, our website, where all episodes of AT Daily are available in the AT Daily section. How you doing? It's really good to be with you. We've got a beautiful page today, a real beautiful Talmudish Talmud page. Just one quick announcement, and then we're going to get into our page. Yesterday I mentioned we've got this effort. Nina, it's inspired by Nina. It's created by Nina. She's in charge of it. But we're really committing to it. It is a day of calling out. A day of calling out to Hashem. We're going to, there's going to be a flyer. We're going to put it out. We're just going to ask people, do you stand with the Jewish people? Are you concerned about anti-Semitic attacks on the Jewish people? Do you believe in God, or that even maybe there's a God? If your answer to these three questions is yes, then join us in calling out to God and saying, help us, God. We're going to do that on June 27th, Sunday, June 27th. The day coinciding with the fast of Tammuz. 17 Tammuz is a fast day on the Jewish calendar. You don't have to be fasting if it's not, if it's not something you do. But it is a mitzvah to fast during the daylight hours on some Tammuz, 17 Tammuz. That's the same day, Sunday, June 27th. But at a minimum, say 3 words. Help us, God. Call out to God on that day. When we called out to God in Egypt, He saved us. When we called out to God in the Esther story, the book of Esther, the Purim story, He saved us. Calling out to God, let's not wait till we're in the foxhole. We should really do it every day, many times a day, but at a minimum, let's do it on Sunday, June 27th. More to come about that, the day of calling out. So the reason we're going early today is I'm taking my son to a baseball game. It's the first day of full capacity at Dodger Stadium, our first game of the year. My son is a high school baseball player, a town league baseball player, a passionate baseball player, and we are a passionate Dodgers household. So God willing, we will beat the Phillies tonight. But at any rate, we should have a great night, and it's good to spend some time with my son at a ball game. All right. Where are we holding? This is Daf Samech Hey, page 65, here in Tractate Yoma, the 6th volume of the Talmud. These are the laws of Yom Kippur. We're working our way through the high priest's service on the day of Yom Kippur when the temple was standing, or when the tabernacle was standing, which preceded the temple. We've come to the point in the service where the high priest is first taking casting lots in the lottery on the 2 goats of Yom Kippur, one to be sacrificed in the temple as a sin offering on behalf of the entire nation of Israel, and one to be sent out into the wilderness where it is also sacrificed, but where it carries the sins of the people out into the wilderness, a kind of visual for what God is doing to us by granting us an atonement when we do our part to gain atonement on Yom Kippur. We've lately been discussing what happens if these 2 goats, which are paired, they come as a pair. Usually they're bought at the same time, they look the same, they have the same value. They remain a pair. On Yom Kippur Day, the high priest casts the lots. It's a random lottery. One goes to Hashem in the temple, one goes to Hashem in the wilderness. They're given their roles, and then they do their separate parts. But what if one of them happens to die by accident, by natural cause? Something goes wrong and interrupts the process. What do we do with the other goat, its partner? They're supposed to come as a set, but if one of them dies, we know we have to bring 2 new goats, because the goats that are going to be involved, we need at least a replacement of the one that died to either be the sin offering properly, slaughtered as a sin offering in the temple, or to be the one that goes out to the wilderness. One of those died before it did. It served met its fate that it was intended for it on Yom Kippur. So we have to bring 2 new goats to replace the one that's missing, but we need 2 because we have to cast lots on them. Any animal involved in the Yom Kippur service has to have had the lots cast on it. So we bring 2 so that we can do the lottery. And then the machloket, the debate that we've been involved in, is that Rav says, so we bring 2, we select one with the lots to replace the one that's dead, and the one that survived of the first pair stays in its role in the first pair, either as being sacrificed in the temple or as going out to the wilderness, according to Rav. And Rabbi Yochanan said, no, we use both of the new pair. We take the new pair and use both of those goats in the service of Yom Kippur, and the one that survived, that its friend died, its partner died, it doesn't get used at all in Yom Kippur. Rather, we let it graze. It has a nice life. It can never do work. It doesn't do anything until it gets a little older, develops a blemish on its skin. Then we sell it for fair market value, and the money that we get from selling it goes into the temple treasury and is used to purchase offerings that are brought on other days of the year, so that its consecrated value will still be an offering to God within the temple, but it won't be used during the Yom Kippur service. That's the view of Rabbi Yochanan. That's the general discussion that we're having. Now we learn that there's an opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. This is what we're going to be talking about today. Rabbi Yehuda says in certain circumstances, when an animal is disqualified, like it was going to be a Yom Kippur goat, and then it becomes disqualified, it may be necessary not to let it go graze and pasture until it develops a blemish and then gets sold and has whatever life it's going to have, and its value used as a consecrated amount for offerings in the temple treasury. But rather, it can't be used for anything, because it was consecrated to be at a certain level in the Holy Temple, a very, very important animal that was going to be used for a very important service, the Yom Kippur service, as an atonement for the nation. And, a highly, highly unlikely thing that almost never happened. And now what we can't do, according to Rabbi Yehuda, is let its sanctity go down a level. It can't be used for anything. It can't be brought as a sacrifice because its partner died, at least according to the view of Rabbi Yochanan, and it can't be left to graze. So we don't do anything with it. It's similar to when there's money like this that can't be done anything with it, we toss it into the Dead Sea. But we can't kill it because it's a holy thing, and we can't let it be used for anything, and so it ends up meeting a horrible, terrible end. I don't know if this ever happened in our history, but at least according to certain legal opinions, what would have to be done with it is we just put it in a room and let it starve to death. Let it starve to death. In a city surrounded by food, it shocks the modern sensibility. Why would you do that? It's so cruel to the animal. But there's a legal requirement according to this one opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. But the sages don't like it. They don't want to be cruel. It's like Rabbi Yehuda doesn't like it. He hates it. Of course he loves animals. He's kind to animals. The Torah specifies in multiple places that you would never let an animal suffer. If your enemy, somebody you hate, has an overburdened donkey that needs to be unloaded, and you have a donkey that needs to be unloaded, you have to go over and help your enemy unload his donkey even before you unload your donkey, and you have to unload both donkeys before you are allowed to eat, to make sure that all the donkeys get unloaded lest they suffer unnecessarily. And here we're going to allow this animal that was going to be, at sort of apotheosis. Okay, it doesn't get to live to ripe old age. That's true. But it was going to be sacrificed as the Yom Kippur offering. Its partner died. Very bad luck. Super unusual in the short amount of time between it was designated to be one of the Yom Kippur goats and before the other rituals were done, it died. And so its surviving partner, we're going to put it in a room and let it starve to death. Yet Rabbi Yehuda says sometimes you have to do that. But the rabbis disagree. So let's see if the rabbis can overcome Rabbi Yehuda's logic, and let's see if we can save this goat from the ruling of Rabbi Yehuda. We're near the middle of the A side of page 65. It was taught in the Mishna that we're discussing, the first Mishnah of chapter 6. And furthermore, Rabbi Yehuda said, if the blood of the goat sacrificed to God, so the one that was, the lot was cast on it to be a sin offering in the temple, as opposed to the one going out to the wilderness. So Rabbi Yehuda said, if the blood of the goat that's supposed to be sacrificed to God, it was slaughtered, its blood was collected, its lifeblood was collected in a vessel. If it spilled, if that blood that was collected in a vessel spilled, yeah? Thank you. Let's light up the darkness. Okay. So it was slaughtered properly in the temple. Its blood was collected by the high priest. Now he's supposed to take that blood in the vessel, go into the Holy of Holies and sprinkle it there. We learned a lot about that, the sprinklings of blood of this goat and of the priest's own bull. It has to be sprinkled in the Holy of Holies. So if between the time that the goat was slaughtered and its blood was collected, between that time and when the blood was taken into the Holy of Holies to be sprinkled, the high priest tripped. Could happen. He tripped. He fell. The vessel fell out of his hands. All the blood spilled. Now we don't have the lifeblood of the goat that was designated to be sacrificed in the temple. We can't complete its service. We can't gain an atonement for the nation because its blood was spilled. This is actually a disaster. All right? So Rabbi Yehuda said, if the blood of the goat sacrificed to God spilled before it was sprinkled, the scapegoat should be left to die. So this is that situation according to Rabbi Yehuda. The blood of the goat designated for the sacrifice in the temple, the sin offering, spilled before we sprinkled it. Its partner, the one destined to go and be sacrificed in the wilderness, has not yet done that. And now its partner, it was slaughtered properly, but the atonement can never be completed because the blood was spilled. What do we do with the goat that's supposed to be taken out to the wilderness? According to Rabbi Yehuda, we let it starve to death because we can't do anything with it. We can't lower its sanctity. We can't remove it for any purpose. It's the victim of a terrible circumstance. That's Rabbi Yehuda. Similarly, if the scapegoat dies, the blood of the goat sacrificed to God should be spilled. Okay, so if the blood stands to be sprinkled, but it hasn't been sprinkled yet, and the goat that was designated to go out into the wilderness dies some other way than being sacrificed in the wilderness, now the blood, this goat was already slaughtered, the one in the temple, its blood was collected, hasn't been sprinkled yet. Now that blood has to be spilled. We can't use it. What do we need? 2 new goats to go through the whole lottery process and do everything from scratch with the ritual of the goats of Yom Kippur. This is what Rabbi Yehuda is saying. The Gemara asks, granted, if the blood of the goat that's sacrificed to God, it's supposed to be sacrificed to God, that was slaughtered to be in order to be sacrificed to God, if that blood spilled, the scapegoat should be left to die, as the commandment of the blood has not yet been performed, as it was not sprinkled in the prescribed manner. Now, we're not saying we agree with Rabbi Yehuda. We're just making a distinction between these two statements, that if you spill the blood, you must leave that goat to die, and if that goat dies on its own, you must spill the blood. The Mishnah says both those things in the name of Rabbi Yehuda. And now the Gemara is questioning that there should be two statements. It's saying, well, okay, we understand what Rabbi Yehuda would be saying, that if the blood spilled, that goat has to be left to die. But why, if that goat dies, do we have to spill the blood? That's what the Gemara is asking. Granted, if the blood of the goat sacrificed to God spilled, the scapegoat should be left to die, because the commandment of the blood has not been performed. It was not sprinkled in the prescribed manner. However, if the scapegoat dies, why should the blood of the goat sacrificed to God be spilled? The mitzvah of the scapegoat has already been performed. That goat stands to die. It's supposed to be taken out into the wilderness to die. Perhaps it has even dying in some other way is enough because it needed to die today, and it did die today. The only essential detail with regard to the scapegoat is the lottery, which has already been performed by the priests. Sending it to Azazel, the wilderness, and pushing it off a cliff, which is the way that it's sacrificed out in the wilderness, are carried out by an appointed person. And while they are prescribed ab initio, that's the way you're supposed to do it. Take it to that cliff out in the wilderness and push the goat off the cliff. That's the way it's supposed to be done. But if it's not done that way and the goat still dies, it's done. The deed is done. You don't have to shecht the goat out in the wilderness. You don't do a ritual slaughter, the kind of kosher slaughter that we even use today for kosher meat, for the animals that when they're killed to produce kosher meat. It's just a slice through the throat. The goat that goes out to the wilderness doesn't get slaughtered that way. It is not kosher for eating. It gets killed by being thrown off a cliff. And according to this, as long as it dies, the only thing that was essential for its part in the Yom Kippur services is that the lots were cast, and that was the one selected to be sent to Azazel. It doesn't have to go over the cliff. So since it did die, and it doesn't matter if it went over the cliff, why, if it died in this way, do we not have to, why would we have to spill the blood? The blood stands to be used for the sprinkling. The other goat died. Why do we have to cancel that? The answer, the sages of the house of Rabbi Yanai said that the verse states, but the goat on which the lot fell for Azazel shall be stood alive before the Lord to make atonement over him, to send him away to Azazel in the wilderness. That's Leviticus 16:10. Until when must the scapegoat be alive? Until the blood of its counterpart is sprinkled. And if it dies before, the blood is disqualified. We learned in a Mishna there. Now, to understand this, so it seems like the goat needed to stay alive a certain amount of time. If it didn't, it's just not going to count, and that blood needs to be spilled. Now, to sort of prove this point, we're going to go look at another ruling of Rabbi Yehuda's about how long things have to be in play before they count, as it were. And we're going to go back to some of the laws that we learned in the last tractate of the Talmud, Tractate Shekalim. We're going to use those. We studied this already, but now we're going to understand the implications of that law, how they're impacted by the Yom Kippur laws, and how they impact the Yom Kippur laws of the goats. We learned in a Mishnah there, Shekalim, chapter 2, Mishnah 1, if residents of a city sent their shekels to the temple with a messenger, and the shekels were stolen or were lost along the way, if the funds were already collected, i.e. the coins for the New Year's offerings were taken from the chamber before the money was stolen, the messengers take an oath to the treasurers of the temple that they did not unlawfully use the shekels, but that they were taken unbeknownst to them or by force. And this is because once the necessary coins have been removed, all other coins that have been dedicated for this purpose are considered temple property wherever they are, and their subsequent theft does not change that status. If the messengers take this oath, they are exempt from monetary liability. So this was the taxation system in ancient Israel when the temple was standing. not the king's taxes, for raising armies and fixing roads, etc., but the spiritual tax sent by all the Jewish men every year to the temple treasury to pay for the offerings that are brought every day and the maintenance of the temple and all the needs of the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. And every year you have to send in your half shekel. And they're collected, as we learned, in the springtime. And there's a certain date when all the shekels, all the half shekels of all the people in the population have to arrive in Jerusalem. But if they don't arrive in Jerusalem, it doesn't matter as long as they're en route. Most of them are in Jerusalem, and when they start taking shekels from the New Year's shekels, for the new offerings of the new year, and it's measured from the springtime, so at that point, even though some shekels are still in transit to the capital, it's deemed that all the shekels in the system are the property of the temple. So the messengers who are bringing those shekels from afar, let's say a town took up a collection for all the townspeople. This is the shekels we all owe. We're going to appoint one guy to be the messenger to take them up to Jerusalem. So let's say he gets robbed on the way. A highwayman robs all the shekels that are the tribute of a town to the Holy Temple, the tithe of the town to the Holy Temple. So he gets robbed on the way to Jerusalem. If we can ascertain whether he was robbed before or after the date on which they started taking new shekels from the treasury and sort of declaring a new tax year, as it were, a new fiscal year for the temple, if it happens after that date, then the loss is borne by the temple. The townspeople have discharged their obligation to pay the shekels that year. If the guy gets robbed before the date the fiscal year starts, he gets robbed essentially during the previous fiscal year when they were traveling toward Jerusalem, then the townspeople bear the loss, and they're going to owe another half shekel and need to get it to Jerusalem. It's their responsibility because their agent, was robbed. It's no one's fault that he got robbed, but they're still going to have to bear the loss. If it happens after the new fiscal year, when its new shekels are starting to be used, the temple will bear the loss. We learned in the Mishna there. If the residents of a city sent their shekels to the temple, I just explained it, okay? And if the funds were not yet collected when these coins were stolen, the coins are still considered the property of those who dedicated them to the temple, and therefore the messengers have to take an oath to the residents of the city that they didn't steal them or negligently lose them, but that they were robbed through an incident that was beyond their control. And the residents of the city donate other shekels to the temple to replace the lost shekels. If the shekels were lost, if the shekels that were lost, okay, this is how it starts to relate to the goats of Yom Kippur. If the shekels that were lost are found, or the thieves are caught and the shekels are returned, or the thieves, repented that they stole the shekels and they return them. So now we have both the old shekels and the replacement shekels that were sent in because the messenger was robbed before the new fiscal year began. So he went back to the residents. He said, I'm sorry, I got robbed. We need more shekels from you. Everybody gives him a new set of shekels. Now he goes to Jerusalem, and the original set are found. So both shekels are found. What do? Okay, if the original ones are found or the thieves return them, so both these and those are shekels. In other words, they both remain sanctified. The townspeople can't take back neither the first set nor the second set because they donated shekels to the temple. Now that money has been elevated in holiness. It's consecrated. It can't be returned to a mundane purpose. It has to go to the temple, both the ones that were lost and the replacement. Okay? But they do not count toward the amount due the following year. Because the residents might say, okay, well, you found the original ones and I sent the replacement. They all have to go to the temple. Let it be that I paid off my obligation for both this year and next year. And then everybody's happy, right? But the halacha, the law says, no, you can't do that. You can't count them toward your obligation of the following year, of next year. The next year, the members of that city must donate new shekels. They have not fulfilled the second year's obligation by giving twice in the previous year. Why? because you are only giving for this year. It was your intention to give for this year, so it was consecrated for this year. It can't be used for next year. It has to be used this year. But Rabbi Yehuda says they do count toward the following year. So once they are consecrated, they remain consecrated, but you can redesignate them for use the following year. And the Gemara asks, what is the reason for the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda? And Rava said, Rabbi Yehuda holds that the obligations of this year are also brought the following year, and therefore it is possible to fulfill one's obligation for the next year by using the shekels of this year. The fact is, some shekels are going to be left over. Not all the shekels that are sent in by the population get used every year. And we don't send them back, even though they were consecrated for use for this year. So even though the normal thing is that when we send in our shekels, we intend for them to be used only this year, some will end up getting used next year. So why not, in this exceptional situation where our messenger was robbed, we gave replacement shekels, the original ones were found, now we've sent in twice as many shekels as necessary, and we'd like to designate half of them for our next year's obligation, why not allow that? Rabbi Yehuda says yes. So Rabbi Yehuda, who's so stringent with regard to the two goats, right, and one that's going to have to be left to starve, here he seems to be, his reasoning leads to a leniency, that we get to use these extra shekels to fulfill our obligation for next year. Abaye, and what is the reason for the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda? Why does he rule that way? Rava said, Rabbi Yehuda holds that the obligations of this year are also brought the following year. What I just said, right? There's going to be some left over. That's why, and it counts in this situation too. Abaye raised an objection to this explanation. It was taught that if the bull and the goat of Yom Kippur were lost, and one designated others in their stead, and similarly, if the goats which atone for a communal transgression of idol worship by instruction of the court, if these animals that were set aside for that offering were lost, and so he designated replacement animals in their stead, and the original animals were found, all the original animals should be left to die and cannot be sacrificed at a later time. This is the statement of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Shimon say they should be left to graze until they become unfit. Then they are sold, and the money received in their sale will go to the purchase of public free will offerings as a communal sin offering. And the reason is because communal sin offerings are not left to die. They still have an owner since they're owned by the community. We don't have to put them in that extreme situation of being left to die. So we can just let them graze, develop a blemish, and be sold. That's what we should do when animals are designated for something, then they're lost, they get replaced, then they're found again. You might think we have to leave them to die. This is what Rabbi Yehuda says. But Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Eliezer say, no. You can just let them graze until they can be sold. Now, according to Rabbi Yehuda, if the obligations of this year may be brought the following year, the bull and the goat of Yom Kippur that were lost should be sacrificed the following year and not left to die. Why does Rabbi Yehuda have these two stringencies? Right? Since you can leave funds that you designated for use this year, and then there were two of them because they were lost and then found, and Rabbi Yehuda says, you can use it for next year. So why not do the same thing with the goat of Yom Kippur? Okay, we can't bring it today. It's disqualified from being used today. It's disqualified from being used for anything but a Yom Kippur goat. But why not just bring it next year? Just keep it, take care of it, and bring it next year as the Yom Kippur offering. Why not? Rava said to him, this is Abaye is suggesting, why Rabbi Yehuda has a contradiction with himself. This is how we should resolve it. So that's what Abaye says. Rava says to Abaye, you speak of communal offerings? Communal offerings are different. In accordance with what Rabbi Tavi said in the name of Rabbi Yoshaya. As Rabbi Tavi said, that Rabbi Yoshaya said, that the verse states, this is the elevation offering for every new moon upon its renewal, meaning that we bring a burnt offering, an elevation offering, it's the same thing, every month. New moon means the new month. Right? On the first day of the new Hebrew month, we have a special offering to bring. The Torah said, renew and bring me an offering from the new contribution. This indicates that communal offerings must be brought from the donations of the current year and not from donations of the previous year. You can't save them for future years. Now, the Gemara challenges this solution. Well, this works out with regard to the Yom Kippur goat, which is a communal offering, and it's purchased with money from the temple treasury. However, with regard to the high priest's bull, which he pays for himself and which is considered an individual offering, what is there to say? Well, right? Why would this count for the bull? Maybe the bull needs to be left to graze because it's not a communal offering. The bull is paid for by the high priest, and it atones for himself, his family, and his fellow priests. So they're all the same family, the same tribe, and the sons of Aaron. And the Gemara answers, there is a rabbinic decree with regard to the bull due to the goat, right? We even though the bull and the goat have different requirements, one is a semi-private offering, the other is definitely a communal offering, we're going to treat them both the same way, lest people make a mistake and apply the law of the goat to the bull or the law of the bull to the goat, which would have different laws. We're going to make their laws the same so that mistake is not made. Now, the Gemara expresses surprise. Is it right that due to a rabbinic decree, the offering should be left to die instead of being left to graze? Right? So now the Gemara is becoming very caring about this awful decree that the animals will be left to die. We've got to find a way out of it. So are we going to let this animal starve to death due to a rabbinic decree? I mean, maybe if the Torah, a written law, an express written law demands that we do that, maybe we'll do it. But if it's just according to a rabbinic decree that's protecting us from coming to violate written laws of the Torah, no, we have to find a way out of it. That's what the rabbis are saying now. And furthermore, this statement that Rabbi Tavi said in the name of Rabbi Yoshaya is itself a commandment ab initio. This is the way things should be done, but it is not indispensable. As Rav Yehuda, not Rabbi Yehuda, Rav Yehuda, and said that Shmuel said, these are Amoraim, rabbis of the Gemara in Babylonia, as Rav Yehuda said that Shmuel said, with regard to communal offerings that are brought on the first of Nisan, right, on the first day of the month that contains Passover, but 2 weeks before Passover, Rosh Chodesh Nisan, it is a commandment to bring them from the New Year's shekel contributions. However, if he brought them from the old shekels that were donated during the previous year, he has fulfilled his obligation. But he lacked the mitzvah. He did not perform the procedure in the proper manner, so he didn't do the mitzvah the way it should be done, but the offering is valid. We don't disqualify it. It is difficult to argue that due to this inessential detail, the sages would issue a decree that the high priest's bull should be left to die, right? So rather, Rabbi Zera said that the reason the bull and the goat of Yom Kippur are left to die, if they become disqualified before they are slaughtered, something happened, right? Maybe the goat was disqualified, and now the bull, which has to be brought in a special order related to the goat, it's going to be disqualified. We need a replacement bull. What do we do with the first bull? Do we leave it to die or do we leave it to graze? What the Gemara is saying is, well, we're not going to leave it to starve to death just because of a rabbinic decree. We have to find a way out of that. So Rabbi Zera said that the reason the bull and the goat of Yom Kippur are left to die is because the lottery does not establish designations from one year to another. Therefore, a goat designated by the lottery of 1 year is not eligible for use the next year. It's already been through a lottery. You can't put it through a lottery next year, and you can't use this year's lottery to determine its status next year. That's why you can't save it for the following year. Now, the Gemara challenges this explanation. But let us bring this goat and another one and draw lots again. And the Gemara responds, it is a rabbinic decree that was enacted lest people say that the lottery establishes designations from 1 year to another. It went through a lottery this year. Then its partner died. We could say, okay, we're going to save this goat and bring it next year, bring it a new partner, and then put it through a new lottery. But people will know that this goat came from this year and it was saved for a year, and they will think that they won't know that it's going to go through the lottery again. They'll think that this year's lottery determines how this goat is going to be used next year, and they would misunderstand the law. Lest they have that misunderstanding, the rabbis decreed that we don't save an animal from one Yom Kippur to the next Yom Kippur. The Gemara challenges this. Now, this works out well with regard to the goat, but with regard to the bull of the high priest, which is not chosen by lottery, what is there to say? Okay, the bull became disqualified because the other animals one of them died, and now we have to like replace all the animals, perhaps. But the bull doesn't go through a lottery. Why can't we save the disqualified bull from this year and bring it as the offering next year? The Gemara answers, there's a rabbinic decree with regard to the bull due to the goat. The Gemara challenges further. Now, we're not going to, just because people will think that the goat's designation is from this year to next year, if we save the bull to next year, they might think that the law is confused that much. So we don't save a bull from this year to next year. And since we can't save a bull from this year to next year, and we can't use this bull this year, it must be left to die. That would be the presumed consequence of this decree. The Gemara challenges further. Is it right that due to a rabbinic decree, the offering should be left to die instead of being left to graze? No, we've got to reject this answer. We have to find another path. So the rabbis stated another solution before Abaye. It is a rabbinic decree due to a concern that the bull will become a sin offering whose owners have died. And since the high priest might die during the year, you could save it for another year, but it's his sin offering. And if he dies during the year, then what is there to say? We can't be sure that that bull can be brought next year. The new priest is going to need a new bull. So this works out, the Gemara responds, well, this works out well with regard to the bull, but as for the goat, which is a communal offering, there's no possibility that its owner will die during the year. What is there to say? And the Gemara answers, there's a rabbinic decree with regard to the goat due to the bull. Before we said there's a rabbinic decree with regard to the bull due to the goat. Now we're saying a rabbinic decree with regard to the goat due to the bull, right? Like they're just interconnected, and the rabbis want them to be treated in the same way so that there's no confusion. Once something went wrong, they're essentially calling for a do-over. There has to be a do-over. And then what do you do with the animals? One proposed solution is, well, save it till next year. But they're saying that won't work. It just won't work. You can't save it till next year. And the Gemara asks, is it right that due to a rabbinic decree, the offering should be left to die instead of being left to graze? Rather, it is a rabbinic decree due to a concern that the goat will become a sin offering whose year has passed. A goat may not be brought as a sin offering once it is more than a year old. And there is a concern that the goat will be too old by the Yom Kippur the following year. And the Gemara expresses surprise. Is this a rabbinic decree? It is certainly a sin offering whose year has passed, and the goat will certainly be more than a year by the following Yom Kippur. That's not a rabbinic decree. It's a Torah law that any sin offering has to be brought from a goat that's less than a year old. So if you have a goat this year and your plan is to bring it as a sin offering next year, it's going to be more than a year old. How could it not be more than a year old? And I'm almost done, so any questions or comments, get them in. And the Gemara responds, this is not difficult, as it is possible that the goat will not be disqualified in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. As it was taught in a Baraisa, with regard to redeeming houses in a walled city, the Torah states, and if it not be redeemed within the space of a full year, which indicates that he counts 365 solar calendar days in accordance with the number of days in a solar year. This is the statement of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. And the rabbis say he counts 12 months from day to day. Therefore, according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, if the goat was less than 11 days old on the first Yom Kippur, it has to be at least 8 days old. But if it's less than 11 days old, if you have a 10-day-old goat, right? And then something went wrong and you can't use it on this Yom Kippur. On the following Yom Kippur, it's still less than a year old. How do we get that? Therefore, according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, if the goat was less than 11 days old on the first Yom Kippur, it will not be disqualified on the following Yom Kippur because it will still be less than 365 days old, as long as the first year was not a leap year. Nevertheless, it is disqualified by the rabbinic decree due to the concern that other goats would be used in similar circumstances, even if they were more than a year old. So they keep coming into what message will it send if we pass this law because we just don't want to leave that animal to die. So we can't. So one way to save it would be just keep it around till next year. But that just doesn't work. There's no way that you can have an animal that was designated to be a Yom Kippur offering this year, whether as a goat or a bull or anything, and keep it around for another year. the final outcome of the law is not like Rabbi Yehuda. If it's disqualified and it can't be used this year, it will be left to graze and then develop a blemish and then sold. It's not going to be left to die, but we haven't got there yet how the sages prove that that is so. I think basically, though, I mean, we know in the Mishna that Rabbi Yehuda's opinion was the minority opinion. The rabbis at the end of the day just outvoted him. They did not want to leave that animal to starve, and they found the rationale for it. All right, that's what I've got today. Let me go to your comments and questions. Paula Schmidt-Klauser, my bachelor's degree was in accounting. I'm loving this. And Nina's telling me that there's a funny debate going on about whether God is a Dodgers fan, a Yankees fan, or a Cardinals fan. Very good. Okay. I know we're not at our regular time, so there's not so many people watching. I imagine a lot of people will be watching the replay later. That's great. So go Dodgers, but really, wish me a good time with my son tonight when we're going back to the ball game, the first night of full capacity. It seems like we're certainly not done with the pandemic, but we're coming out the other end. And as I announced at the beginning of class, we've set a date. This is an initiative created by Nina, and it's incredibly beautiful. We want to get as many people as possible calling out to God. Help us, God. On June 27th, a day of calling out. We don't want to be like the Jews, the people that don't call out to God until they're cringing in the foxhole. Let's be like the Jews were in Egypt. Let's be like the Jews were at the time of the Purim story. I mean, they did actually get to the foxhole. Things were terrible and desperate, but things are very concerning right now. So let's get that, let's get that machine well-oiled and running. Let's get people accustomed to asking God to help us. A day of calling out on June 27th. All the best, my holy sisters and brothers.